Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
A warm welcome to all. Today we will discuss about urban greens, and in this module we will cover what urban green spaces are, urban green spaces and interaction among different groups of people, the urban green spaces and the marginalized sections, urban green spaces and their importance during the global crisis like the pandemic or the COVID-19, resilience-based approaches and urban greens as socially produced. When we look at the city, urban green spaces are something that we can never miss. Urban green spaces have been identified or defined in various ways in different disciplines and by different scholars. Some scholars categorize urban green spaces as different types of vegetation that are located in the urban environment, such as the woodlands, parks, roadside vegetation, roof garden, open spaces, and front and back yards. Other scholars like Kabish and Hesh, they have considered the street trees, urban agriculture, residential lawns, and the roof gardens as a part of urban green spaces. And other than these categories, the lawn and the sporting fields were also included as a part of the urban greens by the Palivoda and Yosofas and others. Colding and others have used the term urban green spaces to refer to the entire urban greens which are either located within or around the urban areas comprising natural, semi-natural and artificial ecological system that are covered by some sort of vegetation. However, the Government of India has defined urban greens as the amalgamation of either naturally or artificially constructed greens which are owned by the government and are available and accessible to people, as these areas provide opportunities for exercise and enjoyment to the people. Thus, urban green spaces can be used to describe a myriad of places: park, green roof, community garden, urban forest and woodland, street trees, and natural conservation areas, greenways and trails, etc. A positive correlation between the use of the urban green spaces and the socio-physical and the psychological well-being of the people have been identified by many scholars through their various studies. In addition to this, Tsai and McCormick established that green spaces help in fostering the community well-being, cohesion and resilience among the community members. Further, Ling and others observed that when individuals visit the green spaces, interaction basically happens at two levels. The first is with the green spaces themselves, which encourage the active lifestyle, and the second one is with the fellow members, which helps in building connection among each other. Scholars have identified that the mere presence of urban green spaces is not enough, but the quality of greenery and the infrastructure that is present within those, basically they affect or create positive influence on the social interaction among people using that. Various scholars have stated that the provision for physical activities in the urban green spaces, they determine the level of interaction people have or people of same age group have. Studies have established that with an increase in the level of interaction between people of the same age group, the tendency of people to suffer from mental illness, which is especially common among the older generations, is reduced. Kellenberg and others study in child established that the nature of social interaction among different groups of individuals in urban green spaces is closely linked to the gender, age, income, and level of education or the socio-economic compositions. In the case of younger populations, Shan observed that younger people in China tend to use the green spaces mostly to pursue it for sports or engage in light-hearted conversations with their peer groups or find newer connection within those spaces. Putra and others, based on their empirical observations, stated that the interaction of children with each other in the urban green spaces encourages the development of confidence and pro-social behavior within themselves. Weber and Anderson observed that most adults in Australia visit urban green spaces to develop a deeper connection with nature as well as to engage in a leisurely informal chat with other people. Selesi and Sciarello, based on a case study in Bari, observed that differential in the pattern of social interactions exist between males and females. They found that females were more motivated to relax and seek more personal communication in these spaces, whereas males were more motivated to engage in the light-hearted communication and pursue sports. Barron and others, based on their study in Durham, North Carolina, have observed that the presence of sidewalks and picnic areas provide an appropriate setting for women and adolescents to interact with one another. In the case of elderly and others, based on a case study in Seattle and Washington, D.C., had observed that the quality of greenery, solitude, and seating arrangement is very important, and most of them tend to interact only when members or only with the members of their own age group. Bertossi, Uza and others have observed in Central and Eastern Europe that social interaction among the elderly can only develop among those individuals who share a similar interpersonal trust. Inequality in access to green spaces by the marginalized section has been highlighted by many scholars, because now if we having discussed the importance of urban greens for different age groups and various genders, it is also important to discuss about urban green spaces and how marginalized section interact with them. Studies have also emphasized that people occupying lower socioeconomic positions living in relatively deprived neighborhood have access to inferior green spaces. Rigolon and others, based on their observation of large cities in the United States, found that regions having higher concentration of the Hispanic and the colored skin people do not have good quality of parks and urban green spaces. Walsh and others, in the context of Los Angeles, observed inferior quality of unsafe green or urban green spaces where the marginalized population resided. Wayne and others, based on their study in Hanover, Germany, found that senior citizens living in poorer neighborhoods face problem accessing the urban greens owing to their lack of availability, whereas senior citizens living in the affluent neighborhoods did not face such problems. Similarly, Shane and others observed that elderly and unemployed people living in poorer residential areas in Shanghai have meager access to the green spaces due to the lack of the availability of the green spaces. Kim and others, in their study in Seoul, South Korea, observed that solitary seniors and single mother families have lesser access to the urban green spaces owing to the distributional inequality of urban green spaces among these section of people. The problem of distributional inequality in access to the urban green spaces by the solitary senior members and single mothers was also highlighted by Heo and others in the case of Seoul. Cachet and others have observed that neighborhoods in the United States comprising of the racial minorities experience a lesser number of green amenities. It has also been observed by Vaughan and others that in case of Kansas City, the low-income areas comprising racially and ethnically diverse population have lesser access to park. Further studies have found that the marginalized population who had some access to urban greens found the spaces ill-maintained and unsafe for them. Rigolon, in the context of countries located in the global north, found marginalized population belonging to the Black and Latino community were denied access to the urban green spaces due to their skin color and the racial orientation. Thus, it can be observed that the minorities and the marginalized population residing in poorer neighborhoods have limited access to the urban greens, and addressing these problems would require a region-specific approach. Outdoor recreational serves as an effective means of dealing with many health crises, like it provides relief from stress, encourages socialization, and allows people to appreciate nature. Further, Shuriko observed that access to local green spaces is extremely important for physical, emotional, mental health of the people, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, as during this period they acted as a major stress buster. According to Jainer and Yadav, physical isolation during the pandemic and the absence of adequate green spaces had increased the discomfort of the city life by restricting people's movement to indoor spaces as home confinement and reducing even their interaction with nature and the fellow members. Adding to this, Aram and others stated that urban green spaces provide ample space for people to frequent or to frequently meet and engage in informal, light-hearted conversation with one another. In this context, Kazimierczak observed that urban green spaces play a key role in strengthening the existing contact with people, and this has in turn promoted social interaction. But with the COVID-19 safety protocols, their movements were restricted and their exposure to the urban green spaces was confined according to various scholars. The park visitation has drastically shifted during the ongoing pandemic, and the pattern vary from one country to the other. Based on a study conducted in Bonn, Germany, by Dirks and others, they found that the number of visitors to urban parks and urban forests increased during this period. This increase was specifically observed during and after the office hours. The visitor comprising of people from all age groups and the presence of novel visitors were also observed. A similar observation was made by Glenn and others, who found that the demand for parks and outdoor green spaces increased since the outbreak began in Oslo, Norway. Further, Venter and others found that during the lockdown, since the indoor training facilities were closed or shut down, there was an increased need for urban green spaces among the residents of Oslo. However, Ugolini and others observed in US, Israel, Italy, Slovenia and Spain a reduction in the usage of urban green spaces which occurred during the pandemic. According to them, in countries like Italy and Spain, which were the two hardest hit by the pandemic, nearly two-thirds of those who previously visited the urban green spaces regularly had stopped doing that, with a reduction mostly among the female respondents. Rice and Pan, while analyzing the global mobility report, found a significant decrease in the time spent at the urban parks by the people. Corpillo and others conducted a study in Helsinki and observed a mixed response regarding the usage of urban green spaces during the pandemic. On one hand, a decrease in the time spent could be noticed among some groups, and on the other hand, there was an increase of time spent among the others. This could be attributed to the rules and the regulation that were imposed during the pandemic by the different park authorities which were based in different countries across the globe. Improved urban green infrastructure proves as an effective means of coping and allowing people to enjoy its various recreational ecosystem services, according to Palivoda and others. Thus, access to urban green spaces during the pandemic becomes important from a socio-physical and a cultural perspective. The concept of green infrastructure was basically defined by Drucksen and others as the infrastructure of green spaces, water and built system, for example, forest, wetland, parks, green roofs and walls, that together can contribute to the ecosystem resilience and human benefit through the ecosystem services. The scholars have emphasized on developing cities that are based on resilience-based approach. Moglia and others explain the resilience of a system as the traditionally defined either by the time that it takes to return to its steady state following a perturbation, or by the magnitude of disturbance that can be absorbed before the system redefines its function or functional structure or the ecological resilience. Similarly, Brian Walker states that resilience is largely about learning how to change in order not to be changed. Monglia and others suggest that embracing a green recovery from COVID-19 will provide an opportunity for cities around the world to become more resilient and sustainable. According to them, the urban resilience refers to the ability of an urban system and all its constituent socio-ecological and socio-technical network across temporal and spatial scales to maintain or rapidly return to the desired functions in the face of a disturbance, to adapt to change, and to quickly transform the system that limit the current or the future adaptive capacity. According to Monglia and others, 3 urban missions for creating resilient cities are: first, by accelerating the urban mobility transition to minimize the car use, like according to them, by planning the cities in such a way that building roads for private car is not prioritized would be or would only reduce the pressure on the fossil fuels, but also it would reduce the pollution and increase the green spaces in the cities. The second is by developing and adopting a regenerative urban design for people and nature. According to them, this can be done by upgrading the suburbans with adequate walkability, compatible mixed land usage, increased medium density housing, and by implementing regenerative urban design, including the well-managed and maintained green infrastructures. The third is by investing and inventing in resilient and multifunctional infrastructure for the future generation. According to them, by reinvesting in a sustainable clean tech infrastructure, investing in local upcycling businesses that manufacture new products using the recycled materials, more investment in renewable energy, and by investing in facilities to convert wastewater into methane for energy production, nutrients, and clean water will create water resilient cities. Nesbitt and others have defined urban green equity as a fair access to and governance of urban vegetation regardless of differentiating factors such as the socioeconomic status, race, culture, or age. They define the two dimension of urban green equity as the distributional equity and the recognitional equity. According to Pipitone and Zovic, distributional equity refers to the spatial distribution of the urban vegetation and the trees and includes the sub-dimension of temporality. For example, the historical context, the seasonality, leisure time, and condition and preferences such as the quality of urban vegetation, the socio-cultural landscape preferences, and the ownership, like if they are public or they are private land. Nesbitt and others have defined the recognitional equity as the acknowledgement of participants' differences, existing and validating Nesbitt and others have defined recognitional equity as acknowledgement of participants' differences, existence and validity in decision-making processes, both formal and informal, and the inherent inclusion and power associated with that acknowledgement. Here, the participant of the urban green spaces need a sense of recognition in both the decision-making processes and as users of the space. In the study conducted by Pipitone and Zovic, they found that in the New York, participants whose neighborhood fell within the lowest income bracket showed a remarkably lower sense of belonging in comparison to the all other income groups. The lower income residents felt that they had less access. The urban green spaces being dirty and unsafe was the reason for their low sense of belongingness. Whereas the white and the more affluent participants showed a stronger sense of belonging during the pre-pandemic era, and their sense of belonging even rose up during the pandemic. Nicola Dembski and Julian Dobson suggest through their study in the UK that providing green spaces is just not enough, but they have to be activated, maintained and looked after, as during the pandemic they found that the park's maintenance was less frequent and less consistent. According to them, the national policy framework should be reviewed and revised to make provision and care of the green spaces, linking them closely with the climate adaptation and the biodiversity net gain, as well as the housing provision. Druggen and others in their articles suggest that urban green spaces can be restored by the community action, where these green spaces are managed by and benefit the local residents. They also suggest that restoration can happen through different actors like the municipality, the business parks, the citizen groups, or a combination of these even. Tengo and Bodin in their study show how in Bangalore, India, citizen group teamed up with the local authorities and they started restoring the urban lakes, creating a rejuvenated lake parks. Bent, Bartel and Codling suggest that community ownership and or management of the urban green spaces can play a very important role in facilitating the environmental management longer period of time. Thus, urban green spaces in this context play an important role in the life of the urbanites and hence also during the pandemic. So, we should be, that is why, focusing on the urban green spaces. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day ahead.